Good morning or early afternoon to anyone watching. I'm so excited to present to you today a webinar on 3 steps to attract and retain top talent. It's a hot topic these days. So I'd love for us to start with an intention. Let's create a breakthrough for you today regarding how to create a high trust workplace culture that attracts and retains top talent. And how I would love for you to do that is to listen today for the gold. Listen as if you paid 10K to be here. Put aside all distractions, close other tabs on your computer for the short time we have together. The ideas I cover in this webinar will help you attract and retain top talent for your entire business career, no matter your industry. You get to keep these ideas the rest of your life and even carry them into your personal relationships. That's what's so beautiful about the ideas I'm going to share for you. They're not specific to work. I have 3 outcomes for all of you. Number 1 is to convey the importance of who you and your team are being in the workplace. Number 2 is to teach you 3 of 5 shared commitments and why they are key to creating a high trust workplace that attracts and retains top talent. And number 3 is to invite you to join my business partner and me in a 6-month mastermind with other business leaders to help you focus on who you're being as a leader, to build team collaboration, and to learn and practice 5 core commitments to retain and attract top talent. Before I dive in, I would love to give you all a little background on myself. Growing up in a family tree nursery business with 50 plus employees, I grew up on the outskirts of Salem, Oregon, in the country. My parents came from Texas, where they were in grad school in soil science and started their own nursery, a tree nursery business, when I was an infant, essentially. And so from a young age, I had imbued in myself this sense of workplace culture, employee issues, conflicts in the workplace. So not only did I watch my mom and dad build a business of growing trees, but also of growing people, growing individuals on their team. And my dad was particularly inspiring to me in this way, as I recall many times he would leave the office and he liked to be out in the field and just work with the field workers and weeding and other activities they were doing to really get to know them and to help them see him on their level and to speak Spanish and get in their world. And I was very inspired by that. Another instance I can remember of my father's inspirational way of being as the leader and founder of the nursery business was at one point he called aside one of his key managers and spoke with him about his concern with his chain smoking habit. And my father essentially, engaged in an inquiry with him and said, look, concerned about your health and the amount that you smoke. Are you going to be around you think you're going to be around for your wife and your kids if you keep this up? So it wasn't that he was telling him not to smoke or, like imposing his idea of how he should take care of his health, but he really cared about their holistic well-being and was really being for their utmost success. And I'll be speaking a little bit about that today in terms of attracting and retaining top talent. Okay, moving on from the family tree nursery business, I went off to Princeton University for my undergrad degree. It was a bit of a culture shock coming from the country outside of Salem on a farm, but I enjoyed graduating from Princeton and that experience. Went on to Notre Dame Law and met my then fiance husband, began practicing law in Portland, Oregon, near where I'm from. Became a wife and mom, and then a leadership coach the past 3.5 years. And a lot of my work with clients individually is on self-leadership, is on emotional intelligence, on how they relate to themselves, their key identity and beliefs, and helping them shift that to a way of being and seeing the world that is more useful. But I'm also getting more and more into other specific leadership principles, which I'll be sharing about today, I lead a group on LinkedIn called The Ultimate Coach, and I started a monthly Bring Being into Business and the Workplace book reading and roundtable discussion around a book about who you're being, and that's called The Ultimate Coach. And on surface level, it appears to be a biography of a coach named Steve Hardison here in Phoenix, Arizona, where I live now. But it's really about who you're being. And in that group on LinkedIn, we really want to look at who we're being in the workplace, because your being does create everything. It creates your actions and the results that you have. Down here on the bottom left is one of those book readings that I hosted, and we invited the author of The Collaborative Way, Lloyd Fickett, to the call. I began reading his book, or I read his book, The Collaborative Way, which is a beautiful 100-page story about a business owner who turned his business around by practicing the collaborative way, and became very inspired about this paradigm, a way of being with and for each other in the workplace, with 5 core commitments, all pointing to what the company is up to, its mission, its vision, or any given project that you're on. These 5 core commitments will help you be so much more effective. And my business partner now, Eric Lofholm, and he's actually the leader of the Being Movement. You see that little exclamation point there. The Ultimate Coach Group is on all these different platforms, and it's now under an umbrella called the Being Movement. And Eric and I led a 7-week collaborative way book reading that some of you may have attended. And we looked at it, as we read it, we looked at it through the lens of who we're being in the workplace. So going back to today's topic of 3 steps to attract and retain top talent, why do we care about this? Well, primarily, as many of you know, the cost of turnover of top talent is extremely high. In this post-COVID area, many business leaders have been noticing that it's harder than ever to attract and retain top talent. And the stakes are extremely high, as most studies estimate that the replacement cost of employee turnover for a professional is at least 3 to 4 times their annual salary. So no joke, this is serious cost for businesses. No matter your industry, turnover costs are very high. So what's the solution? Should we bump up the pay? You know, for many, that's a great solution, but is that enough? According to the Society of Human Resource Management's research from a fall 2023 article, 4 out of the top 5 reasons that employees leave their employer globally are tied to workplace culture. 4 out of the 5, right? So we've got 80% of the reasons that people are leaving the workplace are tied to workplace culture, which is huge. And research shows that the most important ingredient of a workplace that attracts and retains top talent comes down to one word, one concept, and that is trust. You know, most organizational leaders will, on a surface level, they'll declare culture and trust as high priorities for their organization, yet very few actually execute a practice of shared commitments that drive trust in the workplace. And by a practice of shared commitments, I mean how we work together. It's a way of being with and for each other as a continual practice. I want to emphasize that this isn't just a one-time, training session that we learn about these commitments and then we go on our merry way and everything's solved and now our workplace is filled with trust. Quite the opposite. We need to continually learn these practices and learn the nuances of them, but immediately they begin to have huge benefits in the workplace in terms of increasing trust. And it's both a learning and a practice continually. No one's ever truly a master at these 5 shared commitments that I'm going to share with you later. So team members on any given team in an organization, especially in today's global workforce, come from all different backgrounds, work experience, expectations of how to work together. We all come from myriad backgrounds, and without a unified shared commitment to a way of working together, it's inevitable to have a culture characterized by broken expectations, communication breakdowns, et cetera, which result in a culture of disappointment, blame, and shame, rather than effective communication, rapport, and trust. And that's the type of workplace that will actually attract and retain top talent, not the culture that's oriented toward blame and shame and disappointment with broken expectations. So I've shared a little bit around the term being, but I want to delve into it more in the coming slides. You know, without this shared commitment to a way of being as a team, everyone is operating according to their own default, unconscious and unaligned manual. So you can liken that to when we have all these different individuals with different expectations on how to work and relate to each other. We just don't have a powerful force behind our mission, our vision, our projects, any objectives that we're up to on any given sub team within the organization. It's unconscious, it's unaligned. And what we want to move to is a aligned way of being together, where we can consciously choose the way we work together and to hold each other to account, being for each other's success, not for judgment or to blame, but actually to support each other in practicing these 5 core commitments and ways of being with each other. Excuse me, I need to close the door. So in order to move from that unaligned and unconscious default being to the aligned and conscious being, there are 5 core underlying practices or commitments that have been proven past 30 years to drive this powerful culture of trust and productivity and engagement and drive profitability. And that it has a name for it. It's called the collaborative way. And this diagram here gives you a little idea of what that's about. Is 5 core commitments, including listening generously, speaking straight, being for each other, honoring commitments, and acknowledge and appreciate, all geared toward what your company is up to. And underlying that, there's an ethics of responsibility, of taking ownership for your own practice, but of also supporting your colleagues or team members in their practice as well. So again, the term being is maybe something new to you. And I want to share with you a definition here that might help you as I share the term being throughout this webinar. At the most basic level, it's the position you're coming from or how you relate to someone, including yourself or something. The most basic level, it's the position you're coming from. And that includes your identity, your beliefs about yourself and others and circumstances. And everything you do comes from who you are being. So our actions are driven by who we're being, by our beliefs about ourselves, others, the workplace, and situations. So if you can take that idea of it's the position we're coming from about anything, including ourselves, that'll help you understand what I'm sharing in the coming slides. There are 3 foundational principles of being, and this is something that we share in the being movement, which I mentioned earlier, is we are always being. We are never not being. You're always coming from a certain position, whether you realize it or not. What we want to do is to begin to observe our being so that we can become aware of it and choose to shift it if it benefits us, if it serves the results that we want to create in our business, in our personal lives, and all areas of our life. So again, 3 foundational principles. We're always being. We can begin to observe our being. The more we practice that, the better we get at it. And then we can choose to shift our being. And again, the more we're aware of our being, it becomes easier and easier to shift it. I want to give you some examples here as leaders. Sometimes we take our gifts that we have, or you might think of them as survival mechanisms from childhood, a bit too far, and they become default patterns of being that do not serve our desired outcomes. So on the left here, I'm listing some unhelpful default patterns of being that many of us have I have actually a free assessment called a saboteur assessment on my website, joanclairecoaching.com, in which you can help you identify your top saboteurs or unhelpful patterns of being. But some of those examples include being controlling rather than allowing, mistrustful rather than trusting, judgmental rather than curious, which is something we all suffer from at times, especially in the workplace, seeking approval rather than serving, avoiding rather than taking immediate action, and expecting the worst rather than being optimistic. Essentially, all these ones on their left have a flavor of fear or a contracted state of being rather than an expansive, empathetic way of being, or coming from curiosity and creativity. Another one is being more status-oriented and competitive in their work environment rather than self-affirming and self-validating. So I'd love for you all as leaders to take a minute or 30 seconds, a minute or so here, and reflect on which of those unhelpful default patterns of being have you noticed in yourself, not from a place of judgment to judge yourself, but just to be aware and become more and more aware of when you're operating out of an unhelpful default pattern of being. For me, controlling is one of my top, and sometimes being competitive actually as a person who has a tendency to hyperachieving. Those are two of mine. So I'm just going to give you about a minute here to reflect. Which of those have you noticed in yourself the past few days? Another thing that can be helpful is to not to judge again, but just to begin to notice in your colleagues. When do you notice them operating out of default patterns of being that are more from fear and contraction? And what we want to be able to do is help our team members also be able to shift. And I'll be speaking more about team being as we go along here as well. So what are your current ways of being as a leader of your team and your business? And what kind of results are they creating? Are they creating a workplace that's full of trust? It's a high trust workplace, or is it, and are you retaining the key employees that you want to retain? Or are you suffering from some high turnover, especially of your top talent? A extremely powerful shared team of being is the collaborative way, which I mentioned earlier. And that looks like asking, does each of your team members have a commitment to be someone who listens generously to others? What this means is letting go of your judgments or your filters, like I'm right, she's wrong, all the different ideas and biases that we have as we listen to others so that we don't absorb the value and contribution of what they have to say. Another one is, are your team members with someone who speaks straight rather than lets issues or concerns fester, lest, they get upset if you mention something, but it's extremely important to what your company is up to. A lot of time people on a team don't speak straight for fear of people getting upset. And those issues and concerns fester, which can lead to much more costly problems along the way. Honors commitments. Are each of your team members someone who is honoring commitments they make and receive? Getting specific commitments with specific agreed on deadlines, keeping each other informed, keeping that communication going, and resulting in a lot less disappointment and unmet expectations. Assumes the best in others' actions and takes actions in others' best interests. So that looks like assuming that other people have good intentions and are doing their best to forward what the company is up to, rather than having a being of they're undermining me or they have bad intentions. And then fifth, acknowledges and appreciates others in specific ways consistently. If your team is not all aligned and consciously practicing these 5 core commitments of being, Your team's being is by default unconscious and unaligned. Going back to that metaphor with the garden hose nozzle on spray mode versus a fire hose shooting out water. If your team's being is not aligned, everyone's not on the same page about these 5 core commitments, by default, the power of your effectiveness as a team is much diminished. So in this webinar, I'm going to go over 3 of those 5 fundamental commitments on a little bit deeper level in the time we have. And those are listening generously, being for each other, and speaking straight. Fundamental to a high trust workplace, all 5 of them, but I'm just going to go into 3 today. So let's take on the idea here. Remember the intention to have a breakthrough around who your team's being and how you can shift to a high trust workplace to retain and keep top talent. Let's skew your team's unconscious being toward the most powerful conscious being to get those results of retaining and attracting top talent. I want to give you a little flavor of what that might look like here. How would your business culture change if you went from if people consistently in your company are on the left column, or consistently thinking, my boss never listens to me, or Fred doesn't listen to me, Sally never keeps her commitments, Bill's trying to undermine me, I'll get punished if I speak up about this safety issue, who am I to speak up about this, right? Someone else probably, if it were important, someone else would speak up about it. My manager doesn't appreciate me. Just take a moment here and think about, your team members. Are these some of the thoughts that are looping through their heads often? And if it is, that is diminishing trust in your workplace. So what we want to do is help skew the results and skew the being of your team to the right side, where your team is consciously practicing and committing and seeing this in each other of, my boss models generous listening with me. My team members honor their commitments. Bill is always being for my success. Okay. You may not always see the evidence for that, but if you're coming from that place and your team is committed to practicing that, there's a much higher chance that your team's being is embodied here on the right column. My employer values me speaking up about potential risks, problems, or even ideas you might have. And my team acknowledges and appreciates me. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that one, but that's extremely important for keeping a team on a high trust work environment, because people feel they're appreciated, they feel like they're valued, and it just builds rapport among all the team members. So when we notice yourself or your team members not being that on the right side, you may speak straight about it while being for each other's success, while also being attentive for how it's being received. We don't just speak straight and not care at all about how it'll land with the other person. We want to be mindful of how it's being received as we speak. And that's part of generous listening, is asking for people to repeat what you said and see if it aligns with what you were intending to share. A little more detail on being a generous listener as an example. It's both a way of being and a practice. And as a continual learner, getting better and better at it. These are not practices, like I said, that you can just nail in one day or even a week or a month. They're continual practices. Excuse me. So fundamentally, it's about noticing when you're not generously listening. So again, on the left side, we have ways of listening that are not being generous as a listener. Judging the speaker, being 100% right, distracted, or listening to fix. Those are all examples of non-generous listening. Whereas on the right, we have dropping judgments, getting curious. Rather than being right, you're willing to be influenced. You're open to the idea that your position might change. You're open to allowing your position, your opinion to be changed in listening to another person. Distracted, instead of distracted, we want to be fully present in the moment, letting go of distractions as soon as we notice it. And then rather listening to fix when you're listening to someone, you're listening to understand. You're listening for the value and the contribution in what they're sharing. One of the consultants of the Collaborative Way, Ian Edwards, has a quote where he says, "Deep listening is where magic happens. You can literally listen new solutions, innovation, and enhance relationships into existence." That's powerful. Usually we think of speaking as our primary power in the listening speaking relationship, but we really want to bring forward the power of generous listening, that you can actually listen new solutions, innovation, and enhanced relationships into existence. This is not a default way of being that many of us have. And so just learning about the power of generous listening and then beginning to practice it is extremely powerful. When we as a team listen to understand rather than to be right, trust, engagement, retention of top talent, innovation, productivity, profitability, all of these across the board increase, not just retention of attracting and retaining top talent, but all the benchmarks, the results that we want in our business increase. And that may not be immediately, but if you try on these practices, I'm sure you'll notice within a short amount of time some benefits that are quite tangible for your team. The second commitment that I'm going to dive into a little more in detail today is being for each other's success. So what being for each other's success means is assuming positive intent, supporting each other's success, looking for how the other person is trying to contribute rather than having doubts about their intentions, speaking straight as required promptly, reassigning or firing someone who needs to be, and encouraging a colleague to resolve an issue that needs to be resolved. I want to tell a brief story here. I actually was going to tell one earlier that I can share later, but an example of being for each other's success and how powerful that is. So I coached a couple leaders in an organization and was actually hired by the organization because these leaders were essentially at each other's throats. They were having some pretty heated conflict amongst themselves for a number of months. The CEO executive of the organization tried to resolve it on his own in his own way, and it wasn't working. So I was hired to come in, and the conflict was so toxic that it was beginning to affect the whole culture in the organization, where we had one individual might be kind of, asking other employees, like, did she do that? Or, what did he say about me? And, getting other people involved into the conflict, it became very just uncomfortable for a lot of the other team members. And when I began coaching these two leaders, very clearly it could see that they had a story or a way of being that he or she's undermining me. You can imagine if you're working with someone and you have the story and you're coming from a position of being of he's undermining me or she's undermining me, that will lead to some pretty toxic energy in your relationship, right? And so through our work together, when we helped them see how they were coming from that position and all their interactions, they could then begin to shift. They could choose a different being to choose and to come from. And they could choose to be for each other's success. They could choose to assume positive intent. And that was just a game changer for these two individuals. It's like they didn't realize they had a being of he or she's undermining me. So once they become aware of that being and the importance of coming from a being of assuming positive intent, they were then able to start practicing that and shift that. And within the course of 8 or 9 weeks, they became essentially like best friends in the workplace. They were best supporters for each other. Going from each other's nemesis to each other's number one supporter in the workplace is pretty powerful. So just wanted to share that example as for you to help you see how your being is so extremely important for yourself as a leader and for all your team members to be aware of who they're being and those ideas and beliefs that they're generating. So what being for each other's success is not is always being nice or pleasing others or seeking approval. The primary focus really in being for each other's success is serving others, being for their success, being for the company's success. And sometimes that might mean speaking straight, which a lot of times is not seen as being nice. But when we do it to forward what the company's up to be for other success, that's where it drives the effectiveness of your team. The third one, the last one I'm going to delve into today on a deeper level, is speaking straight. And what speaking straight is, fundamentally, I want to share that people across the board in your organization do have ideas that can contribute to what your company is up to. But if they don't feel safe in your workplace culture, they most likely won't. They'll feel they'll be punished, they'll be reprimanded, they'll be looked down upon, they'll, not be a good guy, good girl anymore. So this is about building a company where everyone, not just the top executives, are encouraged to speak up. And that's to whether that's the people who work under them, to their peers, or even to their bosses. I want to emphasize that last piece, especially even to their bosses, because that's the piece where a lot of value and contribution is lost when employees don't feel comfortable to speak up even to their bosses. I'm thinking back in my own experience growing up in the tree nursery business where, a field employee, for example, who might be in a hierarchical scheme, I guess, of an organization, kind of more on the front lines out there doing the work, right? But if they don't feel comfortable, if they see some kind of safety issue in the workplace, to speak up about it, you can imagine how that could result in some catastrophic results for the company when employees at all levels of the organization are not comfortable to speak up and to speak straight. So that's why it's so important to have a culture where you're committed as a team and it's a value that's elevated as something we're all committed to and that's valued and appreciated. So speaking straight, what it is it's willing to risk being uncomfortable, to bring up tough and potentially confrontational issues that relate to what your company or team is up to. And it could include holding your team members accountable to these 5 commitments. Holding your team member accountable to speaking straight could be an example of speaking straight. And even if, and especially when you think the other person might get upset. Because let's be frank here, speaking straight wouldn't need to be something that we all agree on if it wasn't something that was by nature uncomfortable or not a natural default pattern for many of us, right? So the uncomfortable aspect of it is very much part of what speaking straight is, but we do it anyway if it furthers in our minds what our team is up to. What speaking straight is not, it's very important that we identify what it's not. It's not yelling, it's not venting, it's not just complaining or raising your voice at others, just spouting out whatever you think, especially in a heated emotional state. It's not telling your opinion as if it's a fact. It's not sharing ideas that have no bearing on forwarding what your company is up to. The costs of not speaking straight are also extremely high, and that is that, as I mentioned earlier, problems may turn into disasters, less innovation, lowered engagement, higher turnover of top talent, lowered reputation, and that fundamental core principle that drives employee retention and attracting top talent is trust. So when you lean into looking at who you're being in business and the collaborative way as a continued practice, you will become a much more impactful and effective leader, and so will your team and business. There's an example I was going to share earlier around those 3 foundational principles of being, which are that we are always being, we can observe our being, and we can choose to shift it. And that is with an attorney I coached, who I was brought on to coach to help her with her executive presence, to help her with her confidence and assertiveness. And pretty quickly in our work together, I helped her uncover a way of being that wasn't serving her. And that was this idea that I am being audacious or arrogant or stepping on others' toes when I speak up, when I ask questions, especially of more senior attorneys or even clients. If I share my own ideas or input, that's being audacious and stepping on others' toes, whether among her colleagues or, even with clients. So you can imagine if she's coming from this firmly ingrained default pattern that that's being audacious to ask questions, that does not serve her or her organization in using her many gifts and talents, because she's staying contracted and small. And so through our work together, once we uncovered those deeply patterned way of being from her own culture and from her childhood, there's so many instances that were reinforced that to help her navigate childhood, she could then choose to shift to a much more powerful way of being, which is coming from a position of I am, that my input is valuable and my ideas are appreciated, and all kinds of ideas that help her, if she's consciously choosing to come from that as a continual practice, will actually affect the actions that she takes and the results that she gets in her career and the firm gets from her brilliance, her ability to access and speak up when she has powerful ideas that can shift how her team operates on cases and so forth. So fundamentally here, it all starts with you. As a current or emerging business leader, the most effective way to create a workplace culture that you want is to embody it yourself. In other words, to be it. It starts with you. And isn't that an awesome responsibility and gift and opportunity that you, as a current or emerging business leader, get to take on the foundational principles of being in the collaborative way and embody it and bring it into your culture and be like that rock in the lake that has that ripple effect in your organization and along with your vendors and business partners and even in your own family. The principles of a more powerful being and collaborative way will fundamentally shift your relationships at home as well. So now I'd love to share with you an awesome opportunity that my business partner, Eric Lofholm, and I are starting this coming March, next month. It's called a Being in Business Mastermind. And again, as far as the being movement, that's the umbrella term for all these different platforms and offerings that emanated from this amazing book called The Ultimate Coach by Amy Hardison and Alan D. Thompson. And what Eric and I have a passion and mission to do is bring being into the business world and help business leaders like yourself begin to notice their being and choose to shift their being and have powerful team and business results coming from that deepened understanding and practice. This mastermind is for people who are in business that lead teams. This includes managers, business owners, CEOs, or anyone who's leading a team. This is a picture of me and Eric Lofholm. Just wanted to share a little bit about Eric. He's an amazing business person, master sales trainer. He's leading, again, the being movement, which is a huge endeavor he's volunteered to take on himself. And just really enjoyed getting to know Eric and see him embody this way of being of service to help others learn about being as well. The dates of the mastermind are the first and third Tuesday of each month, starting in March this year, 2024, at 10 a.m. Pacific. There'll be 2 90-minute group calls, and then that will go on for 6 months, starting in March. So I want to remind you here that when you adopt these 5 shared commitments, you create the possibility to not only create a high-trust workplace environment that attracts and retains top talent, but you also shift the being of all your staff, your vendors, your joint venture partners, and clients. Again, you get to have that ripple effect in the world once you become more aware of your being and you practice shifting it and helping your team embody these 5 shared commitments as well. Primarily during this mastermind, you are going to grow you. You're going to focus on you, not trying to change other people's being. That never works unless we shift ourselves first. And you're also going to gain clarity on your destination and how you can get your team aligned behind a common vision and mission. So important that we are focused and clear on what we're up to as an organization And then these 5 core commitments will drive us toward that more powerfully and effectively than if we didn't have that shared team being of those 5 core commitments. In this mastermind, you'll learn how to incorporate your business into your document or declarations. And this is your consciously created being. So many of you, in this webinar, it's about attracting and retaining top talent. Maybe you have a default pattern of being, of believing that I'm not good at hiring, for example. Maybe that's the story that you've been telling yourself for months because you've lost a lot of key employees that you'd love to keep. And what we want to do in this mastermind is help you begin to notice that, help you, once you're aware of that, you can consciously choose to shift to a more powerful being, such as I hire only the best and the brightest, for example. Could be, not saying that would be yours, but that could be a consciously created being that you come from, and that will change your actions as a leader in your company, and that'll drive different results. The second one is how being in business can help you achieve better business results. You'll learn more about being and the different nuances on looking at your being and how to shift it. And then the collaborative way process, those 5 core commitments that drive powerful, effective team collaboration. What's included is 6 months of being in business training with 2 90-minute calls a month. And that's going to include 30 minutes of training, 30 minutes of a mastermind, and 30 minutes Q&A and group sharing. And all the calls will be recorded. If you're unable to make any of the calls, you can watch those or just rewatch them if you attend. It also includes an amazing deal here of an all-day being in business training to get you really up to speed on what being is and how it can impact your business. It's going to include a 1 hour one-on-one coaching session. It could be 30 minutes with Eric and 30 minutes with me, or 1 hour with either of us. And it's also going to include an optional Facebook group to help you build on what you're learning and practicing and build camaraderie in the group. And as a bonus, you get to add a key person in your business at no extra cost. We really want to help you bring someone from your team at no extra cost to really help you bring these ways of being to your team and focus on yourself, but help someone else in your team also begin to focus on that and have that synergy between you two as you move this into your company. The investment is $15,000, and this is the fee that we'll eventually charge once we have the case studies to demonstrate both the value of being in business and the collaborative way. We're going to limit the group to 12 participants, and we will be adding participants until we reach 12. Because we don't have the case studies yet, even though we know the value will be blow your socks off levels, we're going to charge only $3,000 initially. And you can either pay up front for $3,000, or you can choose to pay 7 payments of $500. So if you are interested in joining this mastermind and want to learn more, I would ask that you request an interview by emailing me at uplevel@joanclairecoaching.com. And again, that includes 6 months of being in business training, 2 90-minute calls a month. Again, 30 minutes of training, 30 minutes of masterminding, and 30 minutes of Q&A. The all-day being in business training, and 1 hour one-on-one coaching session. And as a double bonus, if you request an interview with me in the next 10 minutes, you'll get an additional hour of coaching for a total of 2 hours of one-on-one coaching. And that wraps up this webinar. I just want to thank you for watching, for listening, for being open to new concepts that can help you and your business massively transform, help your business team, and help you attract and retain top talent among many other business results that I know you all would love to create. Thank you so much, and I look forward to future calls. Bye.